It started as a whisper among the night workers at the station. A rumor, nothing more. A ghost story shared between cigarette breaks and coffee cups stained with trembling lips. They spoke of a man who never bought a ticket. He never boarded a bus. He only stood, always in the same place, by the farthest bench, near the vending machine that hadn't worked in years, beneath the flickering fluorescent light that buzzed like dying insects. He was tall, impossibly tall, wrapped in a heavy coat no matter the season. His hands, pale and thin, protruded from frayed sleeves, the fingers twitching occasionally, as if eager to grasp something or someone. But his face, there was no face, no eyes, no mouth, no nose, nothing but smooth, featureless skin stretching from ear to ear, like wax melted and solidified into a grotesque blank slate. Nobody ever saw him arrive. Nobody ever saw him leave. Yet, whenever the station was nearly empty, in those cold hours between midnight and dawn, he would be there, standing, waiting. Some said he was an omen, that those who dared to look at him for too long would never be seen again, that the buses they boarded would never reach their destinations. One night, a janitor named Elias decided to prove the legend wrong. He had heard the stories, of course, but he was a skeptic. People see what they want to see, he told his co-workers. Just some homeless guy with a mask, that's all. So Elias waited. His shift ended at 3 a.m., but he stayed longer, pretending to mop floors that had already been cleaned. At exactly 3:27, the light above the vending machine flickered. Elias looked up, and there he was, the faceless man, standing perfectly still, his long fingers twitching at his sides. A shiver crawled down Elias's spine. He swallowed hard, gripping the mop handle so tightly his knuckles turned white. It's just a mask, he told himself. He took a step closer. The surrounding air grew thick, pressing against his chest, making his breath shallow. Another step. A sour stench filled his nostrils, something like rotting meat left too long in the sun. His stomach churned. Another step. The faceless man moved. Not naturally, not the way a person shifts their weight or adjusts their posture. One moment he was standing. The next he was closer, much closer. Elias's vision blurred. His pulse pounded in his skull. The world around him felt distant, like he was underwater. And then, the mop slipped from his fingers, because the faceless man was no longer standing still. He was tilting his head, not forward, not backward, but sideways. Further, until the sound of cracking bones filled the silence. Elias opened his mouth to scream, but he never made a sound, because the faceless man had opened his own mouth first. Where there had been nothing but smooth skin before, now there was a gaping, black abyss stretching from jaw to jaw. Something moved inside it, something with too many hands. Elias did not run, because by then it was too late. Elias did not scream, not because he didn't want to, but because he couldn't. The darkness inside the faceless man's gaping maw swallowed the sound before it could even leave his throat. His entire body locked in place, his muscles stiff and frozen, as if something unseen had reached inside him and taken control. His vision swam. Inside that endless, yawning void, something moved, something wet, something writhing. Fingers, not just one hand, dozens. Fingers that twitched and curled unnaturally, clawing at the edges of that impossible abyss, as if eager to pull themselves out. Elias felt his legs weaken, his knees threatening to buckle, but he could not collapse. Some force, unseen and immeasurably strong, held him upright. The air thickened, turning syrupy, clogging his lungs. His chest rose and fell in frantic, shallow gasps. He tried to blink, to look away, but even that simple action was stolen from him. Then the faceless man stepped closer. No sound accompanied the movement. No footstep, no shuffle of fabric. Just the sensation of space shifting, as if the thing had bypassed reality itself to close the distance between them. Elias's breath hitched. That rotten, putrid stench flooded his nostrils, stronger now, suffocating. It smelled like the inside of something long dead, something that had decayed in the heat for days. He gagged. And then, A hand emerged from the darkness inside the faceless man's mouth. Pale, skeletal fingers, wet and glistening, stretched out toward Elias's face. They twitched and trembled, desperate to make contact. A sound bubbled up from the thing's throat. A wet, sucking noise, as if something inside that void was gasping for air. Elias felt the fingers before they touched him. Cold, like ice pressed against bare skin. And then, the lights flickered. For half a second, the bus station was thrown into darkness. When they came back on, the faceless man was gone. Elias stumbled backward, gasping. His throat finally released from whatever had held him captive. His legs gave out, and he hit the cold tile floor hard, his breath coming in ragged, uneven bursts. He scrambled backward, his palms slick with sweat as he pushed himself away from the spot where the thing had stood. The station was empty, silent. The only sound was the faint, distant hum of the vending machine, the same machine that hadn't worked in years. Elias turned his head toward it. The digital screen, dead and cracked for as long as he could remember, was now illuminated. A single word flashed across it in red, flickering letters. Soon, Elias didn't sleep for 3 days. The memory of what had happened refused to fade. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw it again. The gaping, faceless void, the fingers writhing in the darkness, the overwhelming, gut-wrenching stench of death. He quit his job, told his boss he was done, no explanation, no notice. Just done. But leaving the station didn't help, because the dream started next. They were always the same. He was back at the bus station alone. The fluorescent light flickered overhead. He turned, and the faceless man was standing there, waiting. Each night, the dream lasted a little longer. Each night, the faceless man took a step closer. And each night, Elias woke up with the taste of rot in his mouth. Elias wasn't the only one who had seen it. He hadn't told anyone, hadn't breathed a word of what had happened, but the stories started spreading anyway. People whispered about the faceless man. Bus drivers spoke in hushed voices about glimpsing something near the vending machine in the dead hours of the night. A shadow that wasn't quite right. A figure too tall, too still watching. A young woman waiting for the 4 a.m. bus claimed she had felt something breathing on the back of her neck, even though she had been alone. A homeless man, known to sleep in the station when it was cold, was found ripped apart, his insides scattered across the floor like something had torn him open from the inside out. Security footage showed nothing. Nothing but a flickering light. Nothing but an empty station. Except for one frame. One single frame, at exactly 3:27 a.m. The faceless man, standing in the corner, his head tilted just a little too far to the side, and a hand reaching out from the abyss inside his mouth. The station is empty again. It's late. The last bus left hours ago. Only one man remains. A new janitor. He's heard the stories, laughed them off. But as he mops the floor, the hair on his arms stands on end. The air feels heavy. The vending machine hums. The fluorescent light flickers. And from somewhere behind him, a sound. A wet, sucking noise. Like something gasping for air. He turns around, and the faceless man is there, waiting, watching. And this time, he takes a step forward. The janitor's breath hitched in his throat. The faceless man stood mere feet away, his elongated frame draped in a ragged coat, the ends frayed and damp as if soaked in something dark. The light above flickered erratically, casting long, dancing shadows across the empty station. The janitor had never believed in ghost stories. Until now, the air thickened, pressing against his chest like an invisible weight. His mop slipped from his grasp, clattering against the tiled floor, but he didn't dare move to pick it up. His muscles locked. His instincts screamed for him to run, but something deeper, something older, commanded him to stay. The faceless man tilted his head. The movement was wrong. Too smooth, too precise, like a puppet on invisible strings. Then, that horrid sound filled the silence. A wet, sucking gasp like something drowning in thick liquid. The janitor took a trembling step back. His foot hit the mop handle, and he stumbled, barely catching himself. His pulse thundered in his ears, drowning out everything else. But then, the faceless man took a step forward. No sound, No shift of weight, just closer. The janitor's vision blurred. His skin crawled with an unnatural, tingling sensation, as if something unseen was touching him. Something cold. Then that mouth opened, a gaping abyss, blacker than night, deeper than space. The janitor saw hands moving inside it. Not one pair, not two, dozens. Pale, skeletal fingers writhing, clawing at the air, grasping at something unseen. And the worst part? They were reaching for him. The janitor's breath came in short, sharp gasps. He stumbled backward, his heart hammering, but his legs felt heavy as if something was wrapping around them, keeping him rooted in place. Then, the lights cut out completely. Total darkness swallowed the station. The janitor's scream never left his throat, because something cold wrapped around his face and pulled. The bus station remained open, as if nothing had happened. The janitor was gone. No missing person report. No investigation. Just gone. Another nameless employee erased. The vending machine flickered again that night, its dead screen displaying another cryptic message. More. Nobody saw the faceless man. Not at first, but those who worked the night shift began to feel something. An invisible presence. A creeping, unshakable dread. The smell of rotting meat in the air. The lights flickering at exactly 3:27 a.m. And then the news stories began. A woman waiting alone for a late-night bus reported feeling hands brush against her back. Security guards found handprints, dozens of them, on the vending machine screen, smudged into the dust. But when they wiped them away, new ones appeared the next night. Passengers claimed they saw something tall standing near the benches, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. And then the bodies started showing up. Not like before, not torn apart, not ripped open. These bodies were whole except for one detail. Their faces were missing. Just smooth, blank flesh where eyes, noses, and mouths should have been. And the worst part? Some of them were still breathing. Elias hadn't stepped foot in the bus station since that night. But it didn't matter, because the faceless man had followed him home. The dreams hadn't stopped. If anything, they were worse. Every night he was back in the station, alone. The air was thick. The lights buzzed overhead. The vending machine hummed, and the faceless man was always there, getting closer. Each time, Elias woke up with a taste of rot in his mouth. Each time, he swore he could still hear that wet, sucking gasp echoing in his ears. But now it wasn't just in his dreams. Now, it was in his apartment. He saw the flickering lights in his hallway. He smelled the scent of decay in his bedroom. He heard the wet, awful gasping behind his bathroom door. And then, one night, Elias woke up to find handprints smeared across his bedroom mirror. Handprints that weren't his. They were too small, too many, and moving. It's late. The last bus has left. The station is empty, but not for long. The fluorescent light flickers, casting erratic shadows on the cold tile floor. The vending machine hums, its screen blinking with a new message. Hungry. Outside, the wind howls, rattling the glass doors. Inside, something else breathes. Something old. Something waiting. And at 3:27 a.m., the faceless man takes another step forward. Elias was running out of time. The handprints kept appearing. The stench of rot grew stronger. The lights in his apartment flickered at exactly 3:27 a.m., no matter how many times he changed the bulbs. He hadn't slept in days. He couldn't, because whenever he did, he would wake up somewhere else. Sometimes it was his bathroom, his fingers wet with something thick and sticky. Sometimes it was the hallway outside his apartment, his breath coming in ragged gasps as if he had been screaming in his sleep. And last night, he woke up outside the bus station, standing in the cold, facing the glass doors, looking at his own reflection, and something standing behind him. That was the night he made a decision. He had to go back. Elias arrived at 3:15 a.m. The station was nearly empty. A few late-night passengers huddled on the benches, their faces buried in their phones, unaware of what lurked beneath the flickering lights. The air felt wrong, heavy, thick, pressing against his chest like an invisible weight. He scanned the station. Everything looked normal, but normal didn't mean safe. His pulse pounded as he forced himself to move forward. Step by step, his shoes echoed against the cold tile floor. He passed the old vending machine. The digital screen was dead. But as he walked by, something flashed across it. "Hello, Elias." His breath caught. The letters burned bright for only a second, then flickered out, leaving the screen cracked and dark once more. His throat went dry. The fluorescent light overhead buzzed louder. And then, the temperature dropped. The air turned freezing, thick with the scent of something old, something rotting. Elias knew what was coming. He turned slowly, and the faceless man was there, waiting, watching, standing closer than before. His head tilted at that grotesque, unnatural angle, his long fingers twitching at his sides, his breath wet and labored, like something struggling to escape from inside him. Elias wanted to run, but he knew it wouldn't matter. The lights flickered. The faceless man moved, not like a person, not like something bound by the laws of flesh and bone. 1 second he was standing by the vending machine. The next he was right in front of Elias. The stench of death filled his nostrils. Elias tried to step back, but hands wrapped around his arms. Not the faceless man's hands. Something else. Something inside him. The mouth began to open. That gaping, impossible abyss stretching wider and wider. And Elias saw what was inside. Not darkness. Not void. But faces. Hundreds of them. Staring. Screaming. And one of them was his own. They had always been there. The missing janitor, the lost passengers, the nameless faces from the news, disappearing without a trace. Their faces hadn't been erased. They had been taken, absorbed, devoured. Their blank, empty bodies left behind, wandering the city, forgotten. But their souls, their faces, were trapped inside the faceless man. And Elias was about to join them. The hands gripping his arms tightened, pulling him forward, dragging him closer to that endless, black abyss. His own reflection stared back at him from inside the void, mouth open in a silent, eternal scream. His body went rigid. His heartbeat pounded so loudly he thought his ribs would crack. And then, the lights cut out completely. For 3 seconds, there was only darkness. And then, the lights flickered back on. The bus station was empty. Elias was gone. The news didn't mention him. No missing person report. No security footage of his disappearance. It was as if Elias had never existed. But those who worked the night shift felt it. Something had changed. The vending machine, long dead, now hummed with power. And at exactly 3:27 a.m., the screen flickered with a new message. "I see you. A young woman waits alone for the last bus. Her phone battery is low. She checks the time, 3:26 a.m. The fluorescent lights flicker above her. She sighs. She doesn't see the vending machine screen flash. She doesn't smell the slow, creeping scent of decay. She doesn't hear the wet, awful gasping behind her. And when the clock turns to 3:27 a.m., she finally looks up and sees the tall figure standing at the far end of the station, watching, waiting, his head tilted, his long fingers twitching. The last bus never arrives. And by morning, the faceless man has a new face. The disappearances didn't stop. If anything, they became more frequent. Passengers, janitors, security guards, all gone. No bodies, no traces, no clues. Only the same smudged handprints left behind. Only the flickering vending machine screen, whispering cryptic messages in the dead of night. Only the faceless man watching, waiting, growing stronger. And soon, the bus station would not be enough. Marcus had heard the stories. He worked the night shift now. The last guy never showed up for work again. People said he moved away. Marcus didn't believe that. He had seen the reports, the quiet removals from the system. People erased, as if they had never existed. And worst of all, he had seen the thing with his own eyes. It started small, a shadow standing too still at the far end of the station. The vending machine flashing words he didn't understand. A smell thick, suffocating, like rotting flesh left in the sun. Then, the dreams began. He would wake up at 3:27 a.m., drenched in sweat, heart racing. Every time he was back in the bus station, the air buzzing, the light flickering overhead, the vending machine humming, and the faceless man closer each night. Until one night, Marcus woke up inside the bus station. His uniform was soaked with sweat. His hands trembled. The clock on the wall read 3:26 a.m. He turned, and the faceless man was there, waiting, watching, closer than ever before. Marcus tried to move, to scream, to do anything, but the hands wrapped around him, and the mouth began to open. This was how it always ended, the same way it ended for Elias, for the janitor, for the lost passengers. The faceless man did not kill his victims. He took them, swallowed them whole, made them a part of him, their faces, their souls, their very existence, trapped inside that bottomless abyss, writhing, screaming, clawing at the walls of reality. And Marcus was next. The hands dragged him forward. The rot filled his nose. The darkness swallowed him whole. And then, the lights flickered, and he was gone. By morning, everything was normal again. No sign of Marcus. No security footage. No evidence he had ever been there. The vending machine flickered. A new message scrolled across the screen. Full. For now, but not forever. Because hunger always returns. And one night, at exactly 3:27 a.m., the faceless man will be back, waiting, watching, and when the lights flicker, he will choose his next face.